Residents attending the site will be encouraged to, will be required to wear masks and be prepared to show identification of their host municipality. And again, no tipping fees are applicable for this service. Second update for this evening, the Beckwith Street Phase 2 detailed design is moving forward. We had our kickoff meeting with the new consulting team on Friday. You're apt to see some activities happening in late September. There's going to be some topographic survey work going on the corridor, so you'll see some activities there. And we anticipate that you're going to have some borehole drilling going on to explore the rock elevations in those upper 3 blocks in early October. As far as updates on the concurrent Phase 1 activities, this week, the activities that you're going to see, the gutter curbs are going to be poured this week. That'll be the curb that separates the parking bays from the main travel lanes. All of the sidewalks that are going to be comprised of poured concrete will be completed. So any of the gaps you see in the sidewalks by the end of the week will be areas where interlock has been forecasted. Next week, the activities that will be moving forward is the completion of the mountable medians. Of course, we have 3 of them in the center of the streets. We're also scheduling a potential weekend of work on the 26th, and that will be to make up for any catch-up work that we may be behind on weather-wise. We are targeted to have the first lift of asphalt down on the entire job by September the 28th, so that's probably going to be one of the most transformative stages of the project. The second lift of paving will be starting in the week of October the 5th. Really, at this point in time, we only appear to have one challenge with the rollout of the project this fall, and it's the implementation of the concrete textured sidewalks that would be installed at Main. And also at Russell, we're having discussions with our team about timing and weather impacts on that. I would say that is the only feature that appears to be a concern at this point. On the financial end, in the month of August, we completed $433,000 worth of work. Overall, our expenditures in the project were $5.2 million plus HST to the end of August. Financially, the work is about 74% complete, and our extras to this point were $118,000, and we're trending at 2.27% in contingency useful. So again, very pleased with the finances as we get to the home stretch. Last update tonight is about the Abbott Street and Lombard Street project. I just want to follow up with council following the presentation that Novatech held on June the 1st. As we were all aware, we were initially planning to start this as a fall project, but the advancement of the project has been impacted by several factors. Obviously, the COVID-19 shutdown in April that delayed the completion of the Rideau Plaza had some impact on our forecasted schedule. We're also working through some lagging property acquisition matters. Right now, our objective is to, our original objective was to have this project tender ready for to release September 1st. We're now moved ahead to, we're hoping to forecast a release of that tender in October, the first week of October. Going back to the presentation, this is still an 8-week project. It is not as invasive as what you see on Beckwith Street. We do not have pipe work and that happening in the streets, very much above ground activities. Another step that we will be following up with, we are going to bring forward the project details at the inaugural meeting of the new accessibility committee meeting. We do not have a legislative requirement to get approval on these features, but we want to share the upgrades on those intersections with that committee again at their first meeting. And as it stands, the completion date for this project would still be forecasted as the end of June 2021. The concern at this point is whether or not there would be any work started in the fall of this year, which would be very much weather dependent. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dunlop. Any questions for Mr. Dunlop tonight? Councillor Brennan.
Thanks, Troy, for that very much. Two questions. One, the Household Waste Depot, just for everyone's edification, that means unused paint, tar. What type of items do they accept? Just so people know.
There's a long list on our town website, but unused household cleaners, paints, solvents, oils, waste oils that you might have around the house. Generally, again, we do want to have marked containers. There's concern about products that aren't marked, but generally household chemicals that may be left over from use at the home.
Yeah, so anything that is in the original container, just take it there.
That's correct.
Yeah, perfect. The other question I had was regarding Abbott Street, and I remember the presentation we got from Novatech. And that part of that project involves the little piece of Lombard, I think, up to Dairy Queen. Is that still the case?
Through the chair, the project will include the overlay that will take from where we left off in 2016 at the Ferrari intersection. So it'll be a 2-lift exercise. I believe it's a 90 mil overlay. That will connect the intersection up to that point. So we'll have nice smooth asphalt through that. We did survey work on the curbs and sidewalks, and we're looking to improve the sidewalks on the north side. We do have a few grade challenges there that we may be getting into conversations with some landowners on, but again, that's the intention to roll those upgrades into that project as well. Objectively, I mean, we want to have this work tendered this fall and have cost certainty heading into 2021.
Yeah, that was my next question about the sidewalk. So I'm glad we're looking at that. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Councillor Brennan. Anyone else with questions for Mr. Dunlop? Councillor McGuire.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Director Dunlop just said is September 28th the day for two-way traffic to resume on Beckwith?
Through the chair, right now we're forecasting that the top lift and everything would be completed for around the 17th. So I would say around that date is the forecast for when the street would be complete for traffic. But again, I would caution as we will give another update on that a few weeks out, but that's generally how the schedule is shaping together. And again, very pleased to see that Tomlinson is looking at resourcing additional work on the weekends if need be to keep this on target.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McGuire. I don't believe anyone else had any further questions, so thank you, Mr. Dunlop. And CAO Morris, I'll ask for whoever is next on the list.
Yes, next up, we have our Manager of Economic Development and Tourism, Jennifer Miller.
Thank you. So I'd like to just give you a short update on some of our business retention and promotion programs that we've been operating this year. The first being the picnic program that launched in June. I know many of you have taken part in this. It's been a way to assist our restaurant industry get back on track after a challenging spring. So we provide picnic boxes, a visitor guide, a postcard size map, a small gift, which is currently a locally made wooden coaster, and some advertising and promotion. And the restaurant then adds their picnic food. Customers can purchase them and enjoy them in one of our local parks. The program has been promoted both locally and in the Ottawa area in publications like the Record News, the Hum, Edible Ottawa, as well as heavily on social media. We've had 7 restaurants join out of all the local restaurants that were invited. Two Guys for Lunch, Perfect Timing, Boomtown, Harvest Social, Seitu Bakery, Chuckles Jack, and the Pickled Pig. So interestingly, a total of 403 picnic boxes have been distributed to these restaurants, and the total value of sales of the picnic baskets sold to date is over $15,000. And I thought you'd like this quote from Amy Rensby, the owner of Seitu Bakery, who said, "The revenue from picnic boxes alone have paid the salary of one of my full-time staff for a month. It's revenue we perhaps would not otherwise have had," so very well received. On the Roll is rolling along. So far, over $17,000 have been spent out of the $25,000 budget. And the purpose of this is to build the arts and culture community in Smiths Falls and to support local businesses and artists. And so far in 2020, 51 unique events have been supported through 45 businesses and musicians. Finally, new this month is the Stay and Play Bingo, a game launched by the Chamber, the DBA, Small Business Center, On Track, and ourselves. And it's a fun way to explore Smiths Falls parks, museums, and local businesses. So you can print your card off of social media, cut it out of the paper, or pick up a printed card at area businesses. And then you take a picture of your experience, post it on Facebook or Instagram with the hashtag Experience Smiths Falls. And there are prizes awarded on a first come, first served basis. And that's it for me today.
Thank you, Jennifer. Any questions for Jennifer tonight? No, Jennifer, I actually have two. One is this picnic box is wonderful, and it's so nice to hear that we've had such a good receptiveness from the market. Do you know, of the 403 boxes that have been picked up, do you know how many are local residents versus tourists coming from out of town?
We don't have that information. That would have had to been tracked by the restaurants, and they're busy. So unfortunately, we don't have that.
No, that's fair. And is there any interest in continuing that program into next year as well?
Yeah, so, I think this program will last as long as the weather cooperates with us, and we're looking at something similar on a more of a retail level for the holiday season. I think the picnic program has become so popular, I would hope that it repeats itself in 2021.
Okay, thank you. I do have to say, Arlo and I were out at a restaurant this weekend, just the two of us, and we picked up one of the Stay and Play bingo cards while we were at the restaurant, and it was fantastic to just sit there and talk about all the things that we had done over the course of the summer, even with COVID, that allowed us to get out and explore our town. So I'm sure I'm not alone in taking great joy in the Stay and Play bingo. And have you had any submissions at this point to award one of the prizes? Because the prizes are quite good.
The prizes are good, but no, we haven't had enough to award a prize yet. We are starting to see pickup on the program and starting to see some posts. And I know a lot of posts happened over the weekend this weekend, but the prizes are still available.
Excellent. Well, perhaps we should create a council challenge to try and challenge each other to outcompete on a full bingo card. I don't know if council's up for that or not, but maybe we can talk about that later. Okay, does anyone else have any questions for Jennifer? Seeing none, CAO Morris, is there anyone else tonight?
Yes, next up we have Chief Cheeseborough.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tonight's update is from our Emergency Control Group meeting, which was held on September the 3rd. So I'm not going to go through it as I had sent that out to council. I'll just hit on a few of the highlights from that report. The health unit did report on that day that there was 9 new active cases across Leeds, Grenville, and Lanark. 6 of them were in Grenville East and 3 in Lanark East. The health unit is extremely busy preparing for the before and after school programs. The arena opening plans are underway, and they're currently reviewing their protocols. The community center is to open on September 21st, with the youth arena opening on September the 28th. Masks for the town staff have been reordered due to the bit of a glitch we had with the original orders. There's reminding about the tracking of the COVID-related expenses as we're trying to keep a handle on exactly what's been spent to date. The daycare opened last week to full capacity, and we were notified by the Chief of Emergency Management for Ontario that the 2020 tabletop exercise, that is a legislative requirement, has been canceled for all municipalities across Ontario. I think that was a foregone conclusion, but it's nice to get the document in to say that we don't have to do a tabletop exercise. One of the things I did want to bring to your attention was the activities which have taken place today regarding the Premier Ford's notification and announcement today. Today, there was 313 confirmed cases in Ontario. Toronto, Peel Region, and Ottawa are the 3 top spots for cases. It's the highest number of cases since June. And the Premier is considering placing restrictions back on if the numbers continue to increase. He was quite alarmed. He had indicated that it's not a direct result of the return to school. It's more a direct result of the social gathering and people relaxing when they're outside, not in bars or restaurants, but certainly just gatherings in total. He indicated that wave 2 is coming and he wants to increase the number of testing. Now, saying we want to increase the number of testing, we received notification today that the Brockville Assessment Center had to close down due to the high number of people coming in for testing. They're going to reopen tomorrow morning. But again, this is an opportunity to reinforce that we cannot step back from where we are. We certainly can't restrict or relax our restrictions any further. If in fact a second wave is coming, we're not going to be exempt from it. It's critically important that we maintain the current focus on what we're doing. And this town of Smith Falls has been exceptional with regards to how it's been handled, and we've been able to keep our numbers down and low. So that's positive reinforcement. And certainly the medical director of health has indicated that continue doing what we're doing, but to also continue to spread the message that we must maintain the social distancing, the masks, and the sanitizing. That is my update for tonight.
Thank you, Chief. Any comments or questions for the Chief? Seeing none. Thank you, Chief. CAO Morris, who is next?
I am. Thank you. So the last verbal report tonight is about the 2021 budget process. Budget season is upon us. The management team received their budget templates in late July and are populating the base budget figures. So as we have in years past, we do have an outreach effort underway, and as of tomorrow morning, the budget survey will be available online for residents of Smith Falls to weigh in. It'll be on the Speak Up Smith Falls platform, so we encourage people that reside in Smith Falls to participate in that survey. There's also a companion document, the budget guide. We've produced it for several years now. It's been updated and it's available. We strongly encourage people to read the guide. It's not an onerous read, but essential before doing the survey because it will inform the results we get out of the survey. So that's available, and we'll be coming forward through Treasurer Quazile with an initial budget report to committee in October. So it's underway, and again, based on our budget policy, we're targeting an approved 2021 budget by the end of January, and I can assure you things are underway at the present time. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO Morris. Nothing says fall like pumpkin spice lattes and budget. Can you just clarify, the budget guide is available? Where is it available? Is it on the town's website, or is it right in the Speak Up Smith Falls platform?
The latter. It's so perhaps Treasurer Quazile can answer that, but it's you can access it from Speak Up Smith Falls.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. Councillor McGuire.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Treasurer Quazile, did you want to answer that first?
I just wanted to reiterate it that it is on our website as well, just for those that may not want to go through the Speak Up Smith Falls. We've put it there in the past, so it is there again this year. So both places.
Janet.
Yep.
Councillor McGuire.
Thank you, CEO Morris. I'm wondering, now that the town hall's open, what further protocols do we need to get in place before we can let our committee start meeting in person again?
The direction that committee had given us at a previous meeting was to review in-person meetings monthly. So that review will be coming up on the 28th of September at the committee of the whole meeting.
Okay, great. I think it's been really taxing on especially the CIP and the MHC volunteers. So I think as long as we can do it safely, everybody's looking forward to getting back to in person.
Thank you. Councillor Brennan.
Yeah, thanks for the report, and I'm glad we're getting at the budget. And I wonder compliment staff on the guide and the input that we're seeking. I'm just wondering if there's another way to get that message out, the availability of the survey. Is there any way we can do that through print media as well? Lots of people, I know we have a great uptake on these meetings, and there's lots of people watching, and the people that are watching are very interested, and they'll participate. But if we can reach a broader, I know we've tried public meetings and they weren't well attended, but you know, if we can do our due diligence and if we do print media as well, it might be helpful to get more engagement, which I'm interested in.
CAO Morris?
Yeah, that's a great suggestion, and certainly we'll be promoting it through social media starting tomorrow morning, and we will have a look at a media release and perhaps a paid advertisement in print media as well. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Hearing no further questions, CAO Morris, is there anyone else with an update tonight?
That's it for the verbal reports this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. We will move on then. We have no correspondence items tonight under item number 6, so we will move into priority issues. Our first issue tonight is the Hotel Rideau portico. So for the purpose of conducting this portion of the meeting, I'll ask for Mr. Granke to provide an analysis, and then council can ask some questions, and if questions should arise wherein we need clarification that Mr. Granke cannot address, then we will address Mr. Shelley. So I don't see Carl up yet. Carl, are you there?
Hello.
Oh, yes, you are. Okay, perfect. Take her away.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, everyone. I'm bringing forward for Council's consideration just a design provision that has been long awaited for many in the town. So as Council will recall, back in 2018, we approved a site plan agreement to accommodate the reconstruction and redevelopment of the historic Hotel Rideau on 20 Beckwith Street. There is a number of items that were part of that approval that we couldn't finalize at that time, and one of those is the proposed reconstruction of the historic portico that would be built partially over Beckwith Street, and we couldn't really iron out the final details and design details at that point because we were anticipating, of course, the construction on Beckwith Street and the disruptions related to that. So now that we're very close to that, and Parkview Homes is looking to advance the portico discussions. Now we're coming back to council for council's final approval on those design. So I think certainly I'd express appreciation, and the Municipal Heritage Committee expresses appreciation for the work that Parkview Homes and Ken Shelley for taking time out this evening to join us and answer any questions. So as noted, the existing site plan agreement delegates and identifies final approval for the design and the specifications for the portico to such time that that's ready, and we're there right now. The property owner submitted preliminary designs for the reinstatement in July to ensure that the construction is coordinated with the work on Beckwith Street. So the drawings were reviewed by planning and public works staff, and some requested modifications were made to the dimensions of the structure. So it's important to note that all of us have had a hard time finding exact dimensions of what was there before. But just to confirm, based on operational criteria from the Public Works Department, we're looking at a 20-inch separation between the outer pillar and the closest edge of the cycle track, and then roughly 6 feet between the inner pillar and the steps there. So as envisioned in the 2018 site plan approval, we're looking for permission from council to alter the designated heritage property in accordance with Section 33 of the Ontario Heritage Act, and an amendment to the existing site plan control agreement to accommodate the design particulars. And then we're also working on an encroachment agreement to permit construction on town-owned property subject to any necessary conditions. So that's something that we're working on with our solicitor and insurance providers. So in August, the Municipal Heritage Committee met virtually to consider the proposed portico, and Councillors Allen and McGuire were participants in that meeting. So I can note that the committee appreciated the work they done. They supported in principle what was being proposed. So just to note that there would be a steel skeleton for structural stability, but the majority of the outer facade would be in wood appearance. They are planning on maintaining the double pillars that were there previously. The color was something that is still up in the air a little bit. They haven't been Parkview hasn't been able to determine exactly the original color that was there originally, and the Heritage Committee in their support, in the motion of support for the project, left color out of it because they felt that was outside of their specific mandate, but they welcome the opportunity to for continual engagement with Parkview Homes on a color selection, just to finish that project. So I think without further ado, I'm certainly happy to recommend approval for the site plan amendment as contemplated originally, the heritage alteration resolution, which would come forward at the next council meeting, and also look for direction to enter into an encroachment agreement that would be passed by bylaw whenever that's ready. So I'll welcome any questions, and certainly I may pass some specific design questions to Mr. Shelley from Parkview Homes.
Thank you, Carl. Councillor McKenna had his hand up first.
Thank you, Carl, and congratulations to everyone involved with this, including our Heritage Committee. It's an exciting design, and I think it reflects my memory. It's very close to my memory of the original one. I did have a question, perhaps Mr. Shelley could answer it. The two windows to the right of the portico, when you're facing the building, closer to the Dollar World there, they've had the brick, there was a brick relief above the windows that protruded out, and they were, whenever that was covered, they were cut off. Are there plans to somehow replace that brick? I know it's not related to the portico, but it's the front of the building. I just wondered if there was any plans or any way you could actually bring that back, the relief on those above those windows on the arch, if you know what I'm talking about.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The fact that they chiseled those things off was a heartache, because it's not easy to replace. Our expert brick guy that we have on site, he's come up with a potential idea of turning bricks on their side, cutting them off, and maybe replacing it that way. But to tell you the truth, we haven't come up with a real nice solution that we're really happy with at this point in time anyway. The brick,
Thanks.
the little bits of brick, even though there's not a lot to replace, they have been such a pain. Went all the way to England and we found the exact match, but the outside of it is incorrect. It has a very rough surface, and they said they can't build me a smooth surface brick for at least a year. I'm going like, oh. So what we're taking what we're going to do, we're going to cheat a little bit. Some of the brick that the portico will cover, we're going to extract that from the building and use it to rebuild where that big blue window is that you're talking about. And we're hoping that at the end we'll have enough.
Thanks so much, Ken, and I'm not surprised that you're way ahead of me on answering this question, and your attention to detail on this is greatly appreciated. So I'm in full support of the options recommended tonight.
Thank you. Councillor McGuire.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ken, for joining us tonight. I think you've been on almost as many Zoom meetings with committees and MHC and different things over the last couple of weeks and months, so we appreciate your engagement. As Carl said, the committee was really excited to see the designs because even though they didn't have a set of drawings from back in the day when it was put up to replicate, the proportions and the level of detail is really there. You can see how the separation between the first and the second story matches the banding on the rest of the building, the proportion of the columns, everything comes together really well. And it's been a really exciting project to be able to work with Parkview Homes on and Mr. Shelley. I'm wondering, with the slope of Beckwith Street, if you look at the front elevation, Beckwith Street, looking at the hotel, Beckwith Street is kind of sloping down, and then you've got the stairs coming off, and you can see the slope on the bottom step. And I'm wondering, Carl, are the steps included in the encroachment agreement?
Yes, through the chair, the steps would be included in the encroachment agreement as they are within the municipal road allowance. And also we understand there's a number of little encroachments along the side street there that have existed for a long time too, and those would be captured as well.
Great. So what I'm thinking is that we've got these steps that are coming out and limiting the pedestrian width of travel on the sidewalk. But on that right-hand side, we've also got the slope of the street that's coming down, and maybe there'd be an opportunity to put a ramp there that would make the front combination of this amazing historical portico rebuild plus an accessibility feature that would really, bring that entrance into the 21st century. I'm not a ramp expert, but is there, between Ken and Carl and Troy, is there any possibility for something like that at this site?
Well, through the chair, is that the way you're supposed to say this? Through the chair? But yeah, on the right-hand side, we've looked at, we're getting a couple of renderings on what would a ramp look like, how would it be. The windows that are there, the blue, that big blue window that's there, it's right down a lot lower than those. So we're going to bring the scale of window up so it matches the others on the left-hand side as far as the vertical plane goes. And that will give the potential to put a ramp there. If we will have a ramp on the side of the building that would give accessibility, and also at the back of the building, which gives accessibility to anyone using the apartments. But the front, we're not sold on the idea of putting a ramp there, to be honest with you. I realize that's an accessibility thing, but we haven't put it to the test yet to see really is it doable, and doable in a good way. So there's an honest answer for you.
Thanks, Ken. And just to follow up that, is there anything that would change what we're approving tonight if it did become viable or was doable? Would we have to come back to council, or is what we're approving tonight good for everything?
As far as I'm concerned, I'm fine. Just that the steps are being put together the way that they originally were, kind of on a horseshoe. And just in answer to your question, the property line of the building ends at the face of the building. So everything beyond that is part of the encroachment agreement, which I'm a little bit concerned about, to make sure that we're both the municipality and we are covered adequately in case something happens. I'm not sure, I'm not a legal guy to say what that agreement should look like, but hopefully we can work that out so at the end of the day, we're all happy with having this significant piece of stature on really city grounds. So I don't know if that answers the question or not.
Perhaps Mr. Greinke has an answer on whether or not anything further would be needed.
Thank you. So thank you, Madam Chair. So in my view, I would, if a ramp is proposed, that does change what was the configuration of what was originally there. So I would certainly like to bring that back to the Municipal Heritage Committee, and I would, if council would like to further explore the ramp, I would certainly take council's direction to do that. I think at the very least, I'd like to bring an update, even if the ramp doesn't proceed. I think it would be fair to bring an update, just letting you know what was looked at and why we did or didn't do that. I think certainly the encroachment agreement we bring forward would need to reference this, because this does, we look for I believe it's a minimum of about 6 feet of unobstructed passageway along the sidewalk, and certainly a ramp built parallel to that will hopefully be able to maintain that, but I don't have an answer for sure at this point whether that's feasible. So if this is something the council would like us to investigate, we can I can discuss with Director Dunlop, Mr. Shelley, and the MHC, and if we're bringing back something a little bit different, I would certainly be most comfortable keeping council in the loop. It is an important project and property.
Thank you, Carl. I think Mayor Pankow had his hand up.
Yes, thank you. I guess my question is directed mostly to Mr. Shelley. And first to comment, just it's great to see this building coming back to life, and the portico is sort of the crown jewel on top that we've been all looking forward to for a long time. So we're excited to see this come to this point. So 2 questions. One, will residents have access to the 2nd and 3rd floor levels of the portico from the inside? And secondly, when do you hope to have people living in there?
Through the chair. As far as the residents, the 2nd and 3rd floor, there will be one apartment that does have access to it, because that's what was in the original design of the building. So we're continuing with that design and keeping that intact. And we're hoping that we'll have our first model apartment hopefully by the end of September. That's what we're hoping for.
Oh, wonderful.
And as far as the completion of the building, it's been a real challenge in COVID-19, to be honest with you. A lot of our contractors lost a lot of their help, and so everything was just delayed. And then you get one aspect delayed, and then you can't finish another aspect. So you got to push those folks back. So this building was a challenge to start with. COVID-19 just made it a real special challenge. That yeah, it's been an interesting one, but all the heavy lifting's done, and we're into what I consider the final stretches compared to what we were restarted. So we're at that point now.
Thank you, Ken. Do any other members of council have any questions or comments? Councillor Alfred?
Thank you, Madam Chair. If the MHC is supportive of this recommendation, given their longstanding involvement, then I'll rely on their expertise and support it as staff has outlined it. I did have a couple of questions. I note in the 2017 motion that all work was to be completed within 2 years. With regard, it appears to me to be the outside that we're looking at. So is there, I'm just wondering, because Beckwith Street is going to be completed, what Mr. Shelley thinks would be a reasonable estimate to expect that the portico would be finished.
Well, we just put the foundations down. The footings were just poured, actually, I believe, earlier today. We tried to get them poured on Saturday. We could not get concrete. There just wasn't available. So then the forms will be poured up to the sidewalk level, hopefully within the next day. And then the portico, I believe that Troy would be very interested to get the sidewalks poured over top, because they're banging on our door to do that right now. And then as far as the portico construction goes, we're hoping to have that implemented and going by probably the first week of October, first or second week of October.
Great. Just one more question with regard to that, because the portico is, and I have similar memories to Councillor McKenna and probably Councillor Brennan and Mayor Pankow, with regard to how that looked. I do really want to compliment Parkview and Mr. Shelley, but also the MHC for making sure that it's going to be restored to its former glory. With regard to a ramp, if there is other entrances that make that building accessible, I would be more in favor of leaving the steps the way they were originally on the facade. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Alfred. Councillor Brennan?
No, nothing, just to thank Ken and Parkview for the work they've done. It's awesome. And if the building is accessible, I would be happy to see the portico go back the way it is. Although I will mention that I have absolutely no memory of the portico in my lifetime.
Thank
Just
you,
in
Jay.
pictures.
Okay. Councillor Allen, was that your hand up? Oh, Lorraine, you're still muted.
Can I ask a question?
Sorry.
Just a second, Ken.
Okay.
I'm much older than Jay, so I remember it very well. But what I would like to just say to Ken and to Parkview is watching this old building that I loved even at its worst come to life again has been a real thrill for me. And I know that other citizens in town feel the same way. So I know it's been a work of great magnitude and a lot of money, but we really appreciate you investing in our community. Thank you.
Thanks, Lorraine. Ken, do you want to provide some closing remarks?
I was just going to ask, when was the portico actually still there? That's my question. Like, when was it put in?
I don't know the answer to that. I feel like it probably the removal predated both Chris and I being born. So does anybody else on council want to weigh in on that? Councillor McKenna?
That's not a trivia question, I hope. It was, I was about 10 years old or 9 years old, and I was running up and down the steps. My Uncle Herb was the bartender in there, and there was a large moose that hung inside the front lobby, and you could stick your head in and look at that large moose. So I would say it was still up there 50 years ago. So it would have been probably right around the dark times, right? Those late 60s, early 70s when we started ripping things down, and the dark days everywhere, actually. So I'm guessing late 60s, maybe early 70s. But there's brighter people out there that will answer that trivia question. Maybe somebody could figure that one out.
Thank you, Councillor McKenna. So with that, and respectfully, Councillor McGuire's motion does not seem to have support to go back to the MHC and revisit the idea of a ramp. But I do just want to do a quick show of hands. Chris, I see your hand. But can I do a show of hands that council is supportive of the resolution as it has been presented by staff tonight? All in favor to move that forward? Okay, thank you. Councillor McGuire, did you have closing remarks before we move on?
Yeah, I just wanted to note that the idea of the ramp did come up at the MHC meeting, and there was no, from my memory, there was no objections that it would compromise the heritage facade of the building or any black and white reasons why it would compromise the look of the front. So it's just something to consider. I think for people with accessibility issues, it's definitely it's important to be able to go through the front door of a building like this. That's the crown jewel of our downtown. So I definitely, I think there's an opportunity here with the slope of the street and the steps and getting it kind of hidden away there. But if that's not the consensus of council, I accept that. So
thank you, Chris. Thank you, Ken. You've been very patient with us tonight, answering all of our questions, and we are very, very proud to be moving this forward at the next council meeting, which will be this coming Monday, following which staff will be in touch with you. But congratulations on this project. I started working with you on this many, many moons ago, and have been following it eagerly for all of these years. So I very much look forward to perhaps participating in your ribbon cutting whenever that may be. And anytime you, I would encourage you to think about maybe doing an open house or a doors open or something in the future once COVID is no longer a thing, because I think you're going to find that there's a great deal of interest from the community to see not only the reinstated Rideau Hotel for all its glory that it used to be, but also to commend you on the excellent work that you've done to restore this gem of a building within our downtown. So thank you for that.
Okay, thank you, folks.
Thank you. Okay, so moving on, we're moving on to item number 2. Sorry, I'm just having problems with my screens. Item number 2 on tonight's agenda is the July budget monitoring report. So I will turn it over to Janet to introduce the report.
Madam Chair, I'm here this evening to provide Council with a high-level update of the July budget monitoring. As indicated in my report, I'm currently projecting a deficit of about 459,000. The majority of that increase to the overall deficit is loss of revenue and COVID-related expenditures. So as Council is aware, we did receive funding called Safe Restart, about 531,000. Unfortunately, I haven't allocated it yet because it's been very limited in details released on what the eligibility criteria is. So I do have a contact at the ministry that I'm continuing. I did get confirmation that penalty and late fee is indeed eligible, which I was a little concerned about because, as you know, in my report, that's 157,000 alone. The other thing that since I've written the report and posted it, we also received notice from the county that they're going to receive Safe Restart funding for the various childcare facilities. So our allocation of 9% equates to about 66,000. Again, more details will follow on that. And lastly, the Heritage House also received approximately 13,000. Currently, they don't have necessarily any deficits related to COVID, but it's if not used this year, we can defer that into 2021. So finally, on my report, I did denote that the current tax arrears are at 8.9 after the final due date of August 31st, which is comparable to the same in 2019. It was slightly smaller at 8.2. So therefore, I wonder if Council might consider that bylaw 101-31-2020 waiving penalty be repealed. Just the current projection just takes us to the end of September. So each month that this continues on, we're looking at an additional $25,000. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Janet. So just to clarify, the recommendation coming forward this evening is to receive the July report for information purposes and to repeal the previous bylaw?
Just if Council would consider maybe having that discussion, it just would be advantageous to give residents a bit of a heads up if indeed we were going to repeal it. So,
okay, thank you, Janet. I'll open the floor to comments and questions by Council. Councillor McGuire.
Thank you, Councillor Dwyer. I would move to repeal bylaw 101-31-2020 tonight to go to Council next week. I think it was a good idea, and but based on the minimal uptake and the high cost of maintaining it every month, it's the right time to close that one down. Sorry, I just yeah. So I don't know what the feeling of Council is, but if we could get that done by September 30th, I think it would be a good thing to move forward.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Councillor Alfred.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That was going to be my question for Treasurer Koziel. If nothing had changed, and we did mention this at the last time we discussed it, that we would reinstate the penalties, because it appeared that there was no change, and so the people who were most benefiting were those who might have been in arrears prior to COVID. So I, like Councillor McGuire, would like to move forward with that.
Okay, thank you. I see a lot of nodding heads. Before anybody else weighs in, can we maybe just have a show of hands if Council is interested in repealing that bylaw at the next meeting of Council? Yeah, okay, perfect. Does anybody else have comments on the report? Councillor McKenna.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Janet, I went through the budget and I really appreciate the level of detail you've gone into, and I am glad we're looking at this monthly, because significant deficit, which I hope our friends at the province are able to mitigate. But on the mayor and council expenses, as I read it, it was just an extra pay period that month, but we're over budget, which surprised me a little bit, given that none of us are going anywhere. We aren't driving. There's no conference expenses. So I was just a little surprised that it's modest, but I wondered how that happened.
Just through the chair, it's related to the live streaming. There was a prior year payable wasn't set up at the end of 2019. It came to light in 2020, hadn't been budgeted. So all of a sudden that makes it a deficit.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, turn my mic off. Anybody else with questions or comments for Janet? Seeing none, okay, then we will receive this report for information, and staff will bring forward a bylaw to repeal the bylaw. Sorry, I'm just looking for the number of that bylaw. Janet, do you have it handy?
It's 10131-2020.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so that will come forward next week. Item 7C on our agenda is the land sale at 42 Union Street, Smiths Falls. The report is being provided by Carrie Costello. Carrie, are you present? There you are.
Present.
Oh, all right, take her away.
Thank you. I'd like to bring forward to council an issue that we found that arose about a month ago. Back in 2009, we had a severance decision by the Committee of Adjustment that approved a severance of the Greer property to Via over on Union Street. At the same time, the town transferred some land to Via, and that was for them to build the station that exists there today. At that time, it was decided by council of the day that part 4 of the lot would be transferred to the Greers. At this time, this land has already been declared surplus back in 2009 and was discussed by council of the day back 2009-2010. There was no charge to the Greers for this property. However, due to administrative changes and staffing changes, the bylaw was never signed and therefore the transfer never occurred. Trying to make that right for the Greers at this point and bring forward a bylaw to officially transfer that land to their ownership. So if council concurs, there'd be a bylaw at our next meeting of council.
Thank you. Councillor Alfred, followed by Councillor McKenna.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, I'm supportive. This was a deal that we made with the Greers, so we're just delivering. I did have one question with regard to the Via station, though, and I wasn't involved at the time. But that station parking is not enough. That station is not enough. So is there any appetite by the municipality to acquire some land to potentially at least get more parking there? Because it's a problem.
Thank you. CAO Morris probably has a answer to that.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, recently we worked with Via Rail within the last 2 to 3 years to expand the parking. It was a subtle expansion. I think we gained 9 stalls and reconfigured it. So right now they are a little bit landlocked in that location. I would remind committee that a portion of the parking lot is in Montague Township and a portion in the town. So I think for all intents and purposes, we've reached the capacity at that location. Having said that, we are watching closely for Via's plans to provide high frequency rail, which would be a game changer in terms of ground transportation. Because it would go through Smiths Falls. And we're looking at that potential expansion of service as an opportunity to reevaluate the suitability of the present location and potentially look at a new location that would provide greater flexibility and the ability to expand.
Thank you, CAO Morris. Councillor Alfred, you have a follow-up?
I don't know how many years that might be, hopefully not long, but in the short term, is the land where the parking lot ends towards looking out towards Carleton Place, if that's Montague property, because it's quite tight there. There's no, even I noticed the reconfiguration, but it's still too tight and there's not enough parking there at all. So would there be an opportunity to discuss with Montague if we can have some of that more land to broaden the length of the parking lot?
Through the chair.
Sorry, CAO Morris, perhaps first, can we just clarify, in Director Costello's report, she's talking about a parcel on the reference plan. Is that the land that is immediately north of the Via station, which would also be the land that Councillor Alfred is referring to?
I would refer that to Director Costello.
Because my sense is that despite the land being in Montague, it would be owned privately.
that we'd have to clarify with a better map, Councillor Dwyer. The one I'm looking at right now doesn't have our boundary lines on it.
Anyways, it's not going to be decided tonight, and obviously staff is looking at it. But again, if we are off in the distant future not distant future, but in the short term, is there a remedy? Councillor Dwyer and Director Costello are right in saying, is the Greer property the one I'm talking about? I don't know.
Thank you. Councillor Brennan?
Yeah, thanks. This is before my time, but in my view, this report here is just a cleaning up of something that didn't happen. So, council made this decision in good faith in 2009, and so I support getting it done. I seem to remember at one point we talked about parking on the other side of the street, and I'm not sure how that works, but you're not wrong, Councillor Alfred. It's empty right now, but once we get back to normal, and indeed, if we get that expanded service, and I that hopefully that's in not too distant future, we're going to have to look at it again.
Thank you. CEO Morris, you have a comment?
Yeah, so we'll confirm where 42 Union Street is, but clearly it's not. It's in the town of Smiths Falls, so it would not be the property to the north because it's in Montague. So we wouldn't be dealing with it otherwise. So I don't think this transaction would limit any potential expansion of the parking lot.
Thank you, CEO Morris. Councillor McKenna.
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Brennan that these things happen every once in a while, and this is a tidying up of just an oversight many years ago. But I just wonder was there anything else going on at that time when you did the search? If it was over maybe a lapse of 2 or 3 months, did you just take a look to make sure everything else, there was no other loose ends around that period of time? Maybe something else happened. So, but I'm supportive of this. I just, if there was something not working quite right during that few months, was there anything else? And the only way to do that is look at that. Is there any other bylaws that might have been missed? Is my question.
Director Costello.
No, thank you, Councillor McKenna. No, this was an oddity that was discovered, and there was a paper trail associated with it. It just didn't drop off the radar, but unfortunately, due to some changes at that time, the follow through just wasn't conducted. So I appreciate that, though, and can assure you that this was a one-off. I can confirm, Councillor Dwyer, I found a map. The boundary line, there is part 2 and part 5 are to the north of part 4. So there is two pieces of property before we hit the boundary line between Montague and Smiths Falls.
Thank you, Carrie. Okay, well, I think you have clear consensus from council tonight to move this item forward. And perhaps as time permits for staff, we could revisit the discussion about parking options around the VIA station, or perhaps just an information report about the future of that VIA station versus other assets in town. So moving on, we'll drop down to the next item on our agenda. And I apologize, I'm looking at the staff reports. I just want to confirm I'm right here. The next item is the Victoria Park Campground Reallocation Update Report. And this is with Jennifer Miller.
Thank you. In the spring, staff presented a report to council on the work done by a group made up of Chamber Board and staff, town staff, Parks Canada staff, that had been meeting to review potential locations for the relocation of the Victoria Park Campground. The report highlighted the top 3 locations chosen, including properties on William Street, Riverdale, and Highway 43. And as you may recall, you had a fulsome conversation about those various properties, along with the role of the town in the operation of the campground. And it was determined that 2 of the 3 locations were to be removed from the shortlist, and council expressed interest in seeking public input on the Highway 43 location. So further to that direction, council also asked staff to approach Parks Canada about whether their vision for the park could also include a hybrid model of not just public access and open parkland, but could host other tourism-related assets such as a continued visitor center and perhaps some form of short-term accommodations like historic cabins. So we did receive a response to that conversation from Parks Canada in August, and they outlined their process to develop their plans for their lands, and they spoke to the next steps that would be taken to determine land use for their presence in Smiths Falls. It's our understanding that that process could take more than a year to complete. As the September 1st deadline has now expired for a relocation plan, Parks Canada will be terminating the lease of that portion of Victoria Park with the town of Smiths Falls, which will mean that the campground will not be able to operate at that location in 2021. And they have indicated that a letter will be forthcoming to document that. It's my understanding that the Chamber Board of Directors met last week and have indicated that they will provide us with written notice that Highway 43 location is not an option they wish to pursue at this time. So with the proposed locations no longer being considered, public consultation would now just involve determining our role in the Chamber's campground business and the value of a campground to the community. And these were important questions when there were location options to consider, but are now of little consequence if the Chamber will not be operating a campground after this season. It's therefore staff's recommendation to prepare a consultation survey to be implemented should the Chamber find another suitable location for their campground for next season. And then that would determine if there's a role for us to play and what value the community sees in a campground within town limits.
Thank you, Jennifer. I don't know where to start with this. I'll open the floor to comments from council. Councillor McKenna.
Thank you, Jennifer. So this puts an end to this entire conversation. Parks has ended they did what they said they were going to do. The town has done what it said it was going to do, was to look at all of the options available, work with our partners. No suitable option came available. I look forward now to working with Parks Canada on their design for that exquisite piece of property. And hopefully they will engage the public and the municipality in what that really could be a jewel on the corner of Abbott and Lombard there. So I look forward to moving forward off of this discussion and on to the redevelopment of the Victoria Park Campground.
Thank you, Councillor McKenna. Any other? Okay, I don't see any hands. Jay, I see you, but I'm gonna get to you. Jennifer, at this point, the municipality has a fair amount of infrastructure in the ground at Victoria Park. Is Parks Canada assuming that infrastructure, or will there be costs to the municipality to rehabilitate that site back to a natural state? And natural in quotations.
Yeah, no, it's a good question, Councillor Dwyer, and I think it's early yet to know that. We just received their notification in late August, and so those are questions that will need to be asked fairly shortly.
Okay, if Parks is going to assume those assets, perhaps they could let us know how they plan on compensating us for them, because I'm assuming that they were put in by the municipality, and perhaps they will be useful again to a future use that may be profitable to Parks Canada. So I'd be interested in hearing that. My sentiment on this whole thing is that I'm disappointed that Parks, acknowledging, of course, that they do have a long-term vision for the site, and they have a statutory process that they're going to undertake to decide how this site evolves. I think it's premature to make a decision to evict the campground at this point, acknowledging that their planning process will take years. I think we run the danger of seeing the site sit vacant and potentially unmaintained. Parks does have a site on Lombard Street that they decommissioned as an operating site. for canal operations several years ago, and it continues to sit vacant with rusting chain link fence on a crumbling pad of asphalt, surrounded by grass, which is sometimes maintained and sometimes not. And so my hope is that Parks will commit to us in writing that they have an interim strategy for maintaining this land, what they will be doing with the infrastructure in the ground, as far as compensation to the municipality, and a strategy for what this is going to look like while they develop their long-term vision, which no doubt will be spectacular, but we need to get there, and it could take us many, many years. So I look forward to staff coming back with discussions about the future of this site again. And I'm optimistic that the Chamber of Commerce will also come back perhaps with a more robust discussion about what they would like to see happen with Campground Ventures, and if there are any other sites that they would like to discuss, and we can facilitate that discussion at this point. Councillor Brennan, you had your hand up.
I did. What a pity. You know, we've not to rehash it all again, but we had a presentation from the chamber on their vision for the campsite, and does the campsite should it stay the way it is? 100% not. Is the campsite bring value to the town in terms of economic development and tourism? Absolutely it does. And you know, reading the letter from Parks Canada, their bureaucratic machine is in motion apparently, and they're going to look at all of the canal. From my perspective, they promote and advocate for stays along their canal. And there's tons of precedent for that. So there's a way to make it work, and for us to just close it for a year while they figure out what they want. And this year, I evidenced the campground made adjustments in terms of where the campsites were. They were not along the rail, and there was public access. Can it be made better? Absolutely. Is there a better spot for it? Absolutely not. You know, it's up to council to express their feelings. I've heard it, so and I accept it. So in my view, probably there won't be a campsite there anymore. I don't know what will be there. I guess we'll have to wait for Parks Canada to tell us.
Councillor Alfred.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one thing, and again, we don't need to rehash all of it again, but because I want to commend staff and the Chamber and Parks Canada. This was a long road and many meetings and much passion. So it's unfortunate that it came down to that there are no acceptable, either they were unacceptable by the Chamber or unacceptable by the town, but that's where we are now. And as we discussed before I would be talking to the Chamber about another campground, I have long said I don't know that that's the role for the municipality to operate campgrounds. So I would rather see some engagement with the public on whether or not, if we go to public engagement, the first question for me that I would like to see is should the municipality be in that business? That's just a comment. We're not there to go to public engagement because we have nothing to engage right now. But that would be my comment on it.
Thank you, Councillor Alfred. I think that raises an excellent point because I believe, and Jennifer can clarify, but I believe the intent of your report was to seek consensus of council to move to public consultation. But the appetite around the table seems to be that it may be a little bit premature. Can you just clarify what it was you were seeking to consult with the public on?
So I think my recommendation was really to have it prepared to go should the chamber come up with other locations. So I don't see there being any action that needs to be taken at this time.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Pankow?
Yeah, that was really, I guess, my thoughts is at this stage of very be nothing really to survey the public on. And I think if the chamber continues with its effort to potentially find another location, maybe on private land, then that would be the time for us to see. I'm sure they would come to us looking for support. If they do, then that'd be the question we'll have to ask at the time. But it is what it is. Parks does a master plan every decade or two for the Rideau Canal, and this time we're a major stakeholder, so we will have the opportunity to weigh in on what our thoughts are and our vision is for the entire corridor. So when that day comes, which we hope is not so far down the road, we'll have that opportunity. But and Councillor Dwyer, your points are very relevant. We need to understand what their plans are for that area and what they're going to do with the infrastructure, and leaving it the way it is right now, it's not acceptable. I mean, it'll have to be some enhancements made there, regardless of the long-term plan, to ensure that it fits their vision and certainly our vision for our residents.
Thank you, Sean. Do any of the other councillors have comments or questions? No. Okay. So what I'm going to suggest then is kind of twofold. One, that we change the recommendation to be to receive the report for information purposes rather than preparing for public consultation. But also, I would seek consensus of council to direct staff to go back to Parks Canada and facilitate that conversation about interim measures associated with the state of the site and what we can expect within 6 months, 12 months, 24 months, something along those lines. I see some nodding heads, but perhaps just for clarity, I'll ask for a show of hands if there's an acceptance to that. Thank you. Okay. With that, we'll move on. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you for your hard work on that one. We'll move on. Item 7F, the fire department statistics, January through August 2020. The staff report is with Chief Cheeseborough. Chief? Sorry, Councillor McGuire, did I skip one?
Yeah.
Oh, I did. Sorry, Jennifer, don't go anywhere. And don't take that personally. Item 7E is business support program report. Sorry, Jennifer.
You're not done with me yet, sorry.
Oh, that's my bad.
That's okay. So this is a report to talk about a couple of things. So in late August, we launched a follow-up to the May 2020 business survey that was used to quantify the effect COVID-19 restrictions were having on our local business community. And overall, businesses report they've been significantly affected by the pandemic. Those impacts have decreased between May and September. Negative impacts from COVID were identified as 90% in May and reduced to 70% in September, which of course is still quite significant. I think the most impactful statistic from the survey, though, is that more than 50% of those surveyed expected their businesses to be able to recover after COVID-19, but 37% were unsure. Today's news reported a 14-week high of new COVID cases in Ontario. Further reopening plans have been put on hold. British Columbia has gone so far as to roll back some of their opening decisions. And more than 75% of our businesses are concerned about the possibility of a second wave impacting their business. So the stresses and worries identified highlighted business slowdowns and not enough time to rebuild since reopening just a few short months ago. So with this information in hand, I'm bringing forward a draft program for your review this evening that the Mayor's Task Force has been discussing this past summer. In North Grenville, a small business grant has been created and offered through their Economic Development Department with funds channeled through their Community Futures Development Corporation. The application is very simple, with funds of up to $1,000 given for broad use, including operational costs, PPE, web design, and other COVID-related restructuring needs. North Grenville set aside $100,000 and 3/4 of the pot has been distributed as of my conversation with them last week. So the report in front of you this evening speaks to creating a similar program in Smiths Falls, using funds from an existing reserve designed to support the small business community. There continues to be a number of programs and services being reviewed to further assist our business community. And today we're recommending the implementation of the $50,000 fund to support up to 33 businesses throughout Smiths Falls with one-time grants of up to $1,500. So the staff recommendation is to create a small business support program using funds from the Small Business Advisory Center Reserve Fund. Furthermore, to delegate authority to myself, the Manager of Economic Development and Tourism, to approve applications and to use Valley Heartland to administer the funds.
Thanks, Jennifer. Oh, lots of hands. Okay, we'll start with Councillor McGuire.
Thank you, Jennifer. This is something I've been looking forward to, and I think although we're a little bit behind North Grenville, it's great to see it moving forward. I'm wondering if there's a consensus among council to stop the CIP COVID relief program if we were willing to implement this program. I think that quick update on the CIP COVID relief program is that we've got one application from a dentist office. It was a contentious discussion around the CIP committee table. There was some confusion on whether the application was going to go to council to be debated or directly funded. And then through the delegated authority, and it ended up being funded. So I think that it's definitely a distraction for the CIP right now, and it hasn't had any uptake or much of any uptake in the downtown core. And the question is, why is the dentist office in the downtown core eligible, but the one in the mall isn't, or the other ones in town are not? So I think this is a great program. I hope that when the exact number of the 50,000 gets tracked down, maybe we're able to help more than 33 businesses, since I think 54 completed the survey at the first intake. But I would like to see the CIP COVID response wound down as this is activated.
Thank you, Chris. So Chris has suggested that perhaps we transition from CIP funding to this funding in exclusivity. Perhaps I'll just take a quick show of hands to see whether or not there is an appetite from council to do that. No, I've got one. No.
I'll discuss.
Pardon? Oh, you'd rather discuss it first?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. Councillor Alfred, I believe, had her hand up next.
Yeah, I'm not adverse to what Councillor McGuire is suggesting, but I would just one caution. The municipality has tried to leverage all the tools available to us to support our businesses, as has the DBA, the Chamber, Valley Heartland, and the Small Business Advisory Center. And I'm dismayed sometimes, as I know others are, at the lack of uptake on some of this by the local businesses. I'm at a loss to explain exactly why, and I'm sure Manager Miller has some insights in her thing there, but I would say wind it down. I've always been in favor because the DBA had some resources and are in the downtown core, and we're open to that. But I feared and spoke often of it something being extended to the larger business community than just the DBA. So I'm in favor of what Jennifer Miller is proposing, and I'm not adverse to winding down the one that's specific to downtown. But I would say to the business community, it's time for you to avail yourselves of all of the opportunities that are being offered. I see what's the uptake on Valley Eats. I see what's the uptake on Digital Main Street. We can do whatever we can do, but it depends on the business community to come forward and do what they think would be helpful. We're laying the table for you, and I'm not seeing enough uptake on several of these things that are being offered.
Thank you, Councillor Alfred. Mayor Pankow.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer, for bringing this forward. The task force heard from many of the members, and we heard from the business community, the frustrations of not having access to any support if it was not through the CIP. And I appreciate Councillor McGuire's comments regarding the CIP and the limited interest that we've had. When we launched that, it was on the whole that would help businesses pivot and do the adaptations they need to do in order to reopen. It appears the vast majority certainly have done so, and why they have not exercised the CIP opportunities, I'm not exactly sure. It may be based on perception of complexity. I think part of it was timing. from the standpoint that there was very little notice from the province announcing the reopenings at stage 2 and stage 3. I think especially stage 2 with the funding opportunity, and businesses had you adapt now, or no one wanted to wait to go through the process to apply for CIP funding before having to purchase what they needed to reopen. But I would hesitate to shut that down at this stage. It may be a little bit of a distraction or some of a distraction for the CIP committee. I don't want to speak on their behalf, but I don't think there's any major issue with leaving it open for a period of time. I would like to take it back and bounce it off the task force as well to see what their thoughts are. And if we have 2 pots of money that can help support our business community, I think all the more opportunity to try and help them get through this fall. And I think we're all fearful that we're certainly not through this yet. We all know, as Jennifer mentioned, the case counts are up. Businesses are deeply concerned about the risk of a second stage. And as a result, the possibility, as the Premier indicated today, he won't hesitate to pull things back. And we don't know if that means provincially or regionally or health unit areas. But I think what's important is we try to maintain and do what we can to support our businesses. And what's been proposed here is a pretty simple process. And we will make sure the application process is also simple and straightforward. And if it means simply a business owner confirming that they've had impacts to their revenues without having to bring out rolls and rolls of revenue statements and balance sheets and whatever else, I think that's important. We want to keep it simple, keep it retroactive, and give them a helping hand as we progress through the fall when we all expect things to be more difficult than they are today.
Thank you, Sean. Councillor McKenna, did you have your hand up?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not opposed to what Councillor McGuire had suggested. I just agree with what the Mayor just suggested, taking it back to the task force, or even asking staff to come back with some more information if they've got any other options. I just would like a little more context before I would make a decision like that. I do support the Jennifer's recommendation. From what we've heard from small businesses is that every little bit helps. So if that's $1,500 in some business owners, that might mean the difference between making it or not. So it's another feather in the quiver, as they say, it's another little thing that we can do, and I'm all for it. So I just would like a little more information on the CIP process, but it may be time to roll it up into something else.
Thank you, Peter. Anyone else on council? Councillor Brennan and Councillor Allen, and then we'll come back to Councillor McGuire.
Yeah, I mean, this is just a no-brainer for me. I mean, it's a support, and the best part of this is, and you can confirm this, Director Miller, it's retroactive. So, you know, if you're back in February and March and you're scrambling to find plexiglass, PPE, sanitizer, you got your receipts, you can make an application and it's simple. And, you know, $1,500 doesn't seem like a lot, but if you have 1 employee or 2 employees, that will make a difference. In terms of the CIP money, I'm not opposed to what Councilor McGuire says, but again, the Mayor's Task Force is meeting on Friday, I believe, and I think that should be an agenda item, and we can talk about it then. But in reality, when I hear there's only been 1 uptake since that was announced from a dentist's office, I think that everyone, and the beauty of this, everyone can access it, not just the downtown, but all the businesses within Smith Falls. So and with $50,000, I mean, that can include a lot of business with $1,500. So let's talk about it on Friday at the Mayor's Task Force, but in the short term, let's approve this right now.
Thank you. Councillor Allen.
Yeah, no, I agree completely with what has been recommended. I think that anything that we can do to help our businesses, I know I've talked to a number of businesses that are worried and they have every reason to be. It's been hard times. And as my colleagues were saying, if we see a second wave, they're going to need our help even more then. So I think it's great that we can help them in this way. And I like that so many people, so many businesses will be able to access this money. I don't disagree with Councillor McGuire either. But I agree with my colleagues who would like to wait and let the mayor take this to the task force and see what their opinion is. And those are my comments. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor McGuire, you had follow-up comments?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it to go to the task force. Thanks for moving that forward. I think one thing to consider as we move in closer to a potential phase 2, I think the same things that plagued the CIP in round 1 are going to be at play in round 2. It was designed to create a higher quality, up the bar of the quality of design in our downtown core. And therefore it's methodical, it's slow. Also, the CIP does not approve retroactive expenses. So that was another big disadvantage to businesses that had to move when the plexiglass was available. It made it not an option. And even that the one application we did receive, only a quarter to half of what was requested was funded because a lot of the work had already been done. One thing I would be open to, if it's for the council reps and the mayor at the task force meeting, is that if we need to reallocate some of the CIP money into this fund to help more businesses, I would definitely be open to that idea because I think it's the better way to help our businesses through COVID-19. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments from council? No? Okay. Jennifer, is that sufficient direction for you for this evening?
Thank you.
Thank you. So this will come forward at the next council meeting, which will be this coming Monday. So with that, I think I'm on track. I don't think I'm cutting anybody off, but we will now move into the fire department statistics report, January through August 2020, if the chief is available.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The purpose of tonight's report is to provide council information on the activities of the fire department and provide an overview on our staffing deployment and the actions that we've been taking. Following the onset of the pandemic, the fire department has taken significant measures to ensure the safety of its firefighters. The Office of the Fire Marshal and Emergency Management has provided information to the fire departments to protect their staff during this pandemic. The recommendations include reducing or canceling the training sessions, limiting the number of firefighters responding to the calls, the extensive cleaning and sanitizing of all the apparatus and pieces of equipment when there is a call. And as a result of these measures, fire departments have seen a reduction in staffing levels, and that reduction is not limited to just the town of Smiths Falls Fire Department. That's applied right across the board. Certainly, there's been a loss of interest. There's been employment changes, and certainly family commitments have played a major role in some of the staffing reductions. In May, we did identify that there was a need to increase the volunteer complement. We did have some individuals who had left and had relocated due to employment. But at that time, we were unable to conduct any training and to conduct any interviews in preparation of bringing new volunteer firefighters on. So that's been put on hold until recently, when we recently did post 4 new volunteer firefighters, and we're hopeful, unlike the last recruitment, that we do get a substantial number of people who are interested in becoming a volunteer firefighter. The time commitment certainly is a big portion of trying to recruit people for the volunteer position. The requirements for a volunteer are no different than that of a full-time position. So the training level is extensive. And again, with the family commitments, work commitments, it makes it difficult to recruit new volunteer firefighters. At the same time, we had a change in our employment staffing level. So we did advertise and post to fill that full-time position. I'm happy to report that we've had approximately 323 applications. The process did close on Friday. So it's going to take us a week or so to go through that with HR, to weed that down, so that we can go on to the next level and progress towards filling that vacant position. Over the last few months, our averaging staffing level for the volunteers has been 3 to 4 volunteers plus 2 to 3 full-time staff, and that's for minor calls. Now, certainly, I categorize them in minor calls and certainly major significant. All calls are extremely important, so I don't want to be misunderstood. But when we have an activated alarm or we have a medical call that requires 2 or 3 or 4 staff, that's what we've been limiting the staffing requirements to. And again, a lot of these calls during the day are difficult to get a number of volunteers to respond to the calls. So we've activated mutual aid for the more significant calls, or certainly the calls that have had significant importance within the municipality, most recently the fire at the school. The mutual aid plan does identify for the backfilling during lengthy calls or major calls of significance. We have been dispatched from Smith Falls to the surrounding departments to backfill for their stations, as well as provide manpower and assistance and equipment during some of their major calls. I included in our report the statistical information for the first 8 months of this year. And the call volume is at 179 in comparison to last year, which was in the mid 140, 145, 146 call range. So there has been an increase, and certainly the increase has been in the mutual aid responses, both received and both responding to the other surrounding departments. Training for 2020, we've been limited to 6 training nights. Certainly the number of training nights prior to the state of emergency being declared both provincially and municipally. And we again resumed our training starting in August, and we've had 2 trainings since resuming that. Our hope and desire is that we can fill the number of vacant positions that we currently have within the volunteer complement. We're seeking approximately 6 new volunteers, which will bring our complement back up to 18 as was listed at the start of the year. Again, the province of Ontario, through the Office of the Fire Marshal, had indicated a number of years ago that in order to have the proper number of staff responding to certain calls or major calls, it was a 1-to-5 ratio. And that still holds part today. So for every 5 volunteers you have on, you can expect 1 of them to be able to respond to a major call. If you look at the NFPA 1710 and 1720 requirements, their staffing is requiring 10 staff, 2 vehicles in 10 minutes. We haven't deployed that NFPA standard as of yet, but certainly it's critical to realize that in order to do a proper fire response to a major structure fire, you are going to require a minimum of 10 staff, and that's comprised of both volunteer and full-time staff. We are right on the border right now, and it is my opinion that with the recruitment of the number of volunteers, bringing the staffing levels up, that we'll be able to maintain the current services that we provide to the town of Smith Falls, as well as meeting the numbers and requirements that the Office of the Fire Marshal has set forth. That is my report for tonight.
Thank you. Chief, I'll start with Councillor McGuire, please.
Thank you, Chief. I always light up when I get to see statistics. And I think this is a great start for us. I'm wondering why we haven't had an annual report from the fire department since 2016.
Through the chair, that's an excellent question. Unfortunately, I didn't start till mid-2018, so I can't respond to the 2017 or 18 report. 2019, we have the report 90%, 95% complete, but certainly due to other things that have taken place at the start of the year and our current situation with our available staff that we have on staff, that it hasn't been completed, but it will be completed within the next week or 2 and will be presented to council. And it'll coincide with hopefully the release of preparation for the 2020 report nearing the 1st of December.
Excellent. That's great news to hear that the 2019 report is on the way. I really enjoyed the 2016 report. I encourage everyone on council to find it. It's on the town's website on the fire department page. It's got data on things like personnel and years of service, level of training, fire prevention activities, investigations, convictions. It's got the calls to the dispatch center and stats with compared to the benchmarks that are set by the NFPA standards. And it's got the 5-year record of the data. So you can really see the trends over time and how things move. It's got our information on mutual aid. It's got the turnout and response time by neighborhood, which is really interesting. It's color coded into 5 or 6 different sections around town. It's got the number of firefighters per incident in the year that showed up. And then it's got a great update on the financials and the vehicles so that we have a good picture of what to expect coming forward capital wise. Are we still measuring all of those things even though we haven't been reporting on them?
All the data is measured through our standard incident report that goes to the Office of the Fire Marshal. So they produce all the statistical information with regards to the turnout, time of day of the week, based on an 8-hour operation. So from 8 to 4, they can tell you exactly what the number of calls and the average staffing level is. With regards to the financials we produce in-house based on our monthly financial report from Janet Koziel. So we have that information. With regards to the information based on region or section of the town, I would have to research that to provide that level of detail.
Great, thank you, Chief. I look forward to the 2019 report coming to council.
Thank you. Mayor Pankow.
Thanks, Chief. Can you advise on training, and from the standpoint that, I mean, we're down about 6 volunteers right now. Training, I think, for a while during COVID was restricted or very limited. And I have to assume that any raw recruits coming in will have to go through extensive training. So I guess is a fire college up and running, training people? And secondly, in-house training, how is that operating during these times? And how long will it take from the time that we get some people here, the volunteers and a new professional firefighter, and that they will be all up and trained and able to help. And I just want to thank you for, I guess, your leadership through this and all of our partners. I guess this is a great example where we're mutual aid. Sometimes we all go through peaks and valleys with our personnel, and it's good to know that there's others there that can support us if we have needs at different times. At the same time, we've been there to support our municipal partners as well.
Through the chair, thank you, Your Worship. Excellent questions. With regards to the full-time position and the training level, in the posting for that position, it detailed the bare minimum requirements. Those requirements are based on the fact that if we're successful in getting a person that fits within the organization, it would be a matter of orientation that they could start responding in the vehicles. We put the requirements in for the DZ licensing and the Firefighter 1, Firefighter 2, along with some of the other NFPA requirements. So we're quite hopeful that person through orientation can respond and probably a month of training with regards to the communication system. But certainly we get that person in and then we've got that position filled with regards to response. With the volunteers, we're working with the Lanark County Chiefs. There's approximately 20 to 30 volunteers that are required throughout Lanark County that they're going to start recruiting for. So again, we're not alone in the staffing shortage. So it has been suggested that we work together, and it's not a fast track, but certainly an increase in the number of training nights and weekends. We do it jointly. That way it's not taxing within our training sessions. But we do it together, and hopefully we can get that done and up and running in a time frame of 2 to 3 months. Very, very aggressive. But again, if we have people coming into the volunteer sector that have some of the requirements or have some experience, that's going to expedite it that much quicker. So we're hopeful through the chiefs, and that was brought up earlier this month, that we can coordinate and organize that and get that on track as well.
Thank you, and also want to express my gratitude to the volunteers who come out probably more frequently than they may have in the past, knowing that we're a little bit short from time to time, and to our full-time firefighters who, I guess during the summer, probably some have had to give up some vacation time, and whether it's responding to calls or making sure we are looking after our dispatch duties, stepping up when things are a little bit short. So I guess just thank you to you guys for being here when we need you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Councillor Alfred next.
Just what you've told us, Chief. If this were to translate into a trend where volunteers, firefighters were not joining up, what would be our alternative to hire more full time? This seems like it is like a bigger thing than just here in Smiths Falls. And how does that offset? How do you offset the lack of volunteers?
Through the chair, this situation is not something that's come up in the last year, 5 years, or 10 years. Right across Canada, there's been a retention and recruitment problem with volunteer firefighters. And that's been based on the mandated requirements for the same level of training that is required for a full-time firefighter. And again, those hours and commitment 5, 10, 20 years ago, or when I started, maybe a little longer, you had that time and you had that interest. The communities were smaller. The call volume wasn't as high. Back then, there wasn't the medical tiered response. So there's just the amount of requirement that's been placed on the volunteers has made it that much more difficult, along with the flexibility of employers. Years ago, employers supported the communities and allowed their employees to leave for major calls, or certainly calls during the day when they knew that the volunteer staffing level wasn't available. You're not getting that anymore. And with the pandemic situation, people are at home. They're not going out, and especially if it's a medical call or a call where you have to have the face-to-face contact, there's that built-in anxiety and fear. Not every firefighter will come forward and tell you they've got a concern about it, but it is there. And to answer your question, what happens if we cannot fulfill the roles of the volunteer firefighter? That's going to have to be a decision of council based on the recommendations from the fire chief on the level of service that we provide the community. Do we continue to provide all that we currently do in the establishing regulating bylaw? Or do we advise the municipality that we may have to reduce that level of service, contract services outside the municipality, hire more full-time staff? That would certainly be a huge financial cost increase. So there's a number of things that we'll seriously need to look at and review and see exactly what the best step forward is. And certainly in my opinion, I believe that there are enough available people that could volunteer. So do we change our method of hiring volunteers? Some other departments have hired individuals that can strictly drive a vehicle. Some have hired them that can strictly go to a medical call. We have to be very careful on how we structure our recruitment process because you could get caught. And we don't want to create a situation that's going to cause us grief or put us in a situation that we're not able to properly function. So I think what we need to do at this point in time is wait till the closing of the volunteer posting is, which is the end of the month. See if we are able to fulfill those positions. And if we can tie in with the community or with the county and fast track some of these applications, then we'll be back to a normal situation. But long term, it's just getting progressively more difficult to maintain that level and to maintain the level of service that we're providing.
Thank you, Chief. If I may, I do want to echo Mayor Panko. Your leadership, even at the Emergency Measures Control Group, has been very valued and very much appreciated. I know our firefighters, and I think we left you some messages as to how essential both our police and fire are. So Again, great admiration for you and your staff, Chief. I look forward to the outcome of your hiring process and what will fall out of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of council with comment? Councillor Allen?
Most of my questions have been answered, but I just have one, Chief. When I was reading this report over, I noticed that, and I don't know how many full-time people we have, but you're saying in your report that to minor calls, we send 2 to 3, and to major calls, we send 2 to 3. So your major calls, I noted that you have more volunteers, but would a major call not require more fully trained permanent staff at it?
Through the chair, our current staffing level with regards to full-time is 5. At the time when we were reviewing the statistical information, we were down to 4. We had 1 full-time staff that was off for approximately 3 months due to personal reasons, had back surgery. And then the vacancy within the full-time complement. As well, we have to maintain 1 person at the communications level. So out of the 4, you're down to the 2 or 3 staff that are available to respond. So again, hopeful that we can get through the criteria for the full-time position, get back up to a complement of 6. And then we'll have more availability for the full-time staff to respond. We'll have 5 available staff to respond and maintain the communication center.
Can I just have one more question? I gathered from your comments that the training nights and what's expected of the volunteers who have a full-time job, probably, many of them, and a family, is great. And perhaps it's more expectation that's necessary than they would need if we made it more, not easy, but more attainable. Like, is what the ministry is saying we must have, is it too much for volunteer firefighters? And is that part of the problem?
Through the chair, I don't think that's part of the problem. I think part of the problem is training twice a month certainly restricts the availability of staff to attend the training for those that are on shift work or those that have young children that are involved in sports. Certainly being able to provide training maybe once a week or make up sessions for those that can't make that every other week would be more applicable to draw those people out. But I did sit down with all staff last year, and I asked the staff that same very question, is what they felt was important as far as the level of training percentage for a year, and as well the level of response to emergencies. And it was the staff that came up with that training should be based on an 80% level and call volume should be based on a 60% level. So they too felt with the amount of changes that's in the Ontario Fire Service and the amount of changes that goes on a daily basis with regards to types of response, that they felt, as I did, that training is paramount and that 80% was a reasonable expectation for staff to attend those training sessions. Otherwise, you could go a month or 2 months missing some critical recertification or information on new firefighting techniques or response. So, it's nice to say that you have 50 people in the department, but it's not so nice to say that you've only got 10 of them that are fully trained and fully instructed. Now you're putting your eggs in one basket. And on the day that those 10 people aren't available, on the day that you're going to have problems. So from a standpoint, from an organization, it's extremely important that all staff are trained to at least the basic level and provide that flexibility within the system that allows individuals who can't make those specific nights the opportunity to do catch-up or make-up sessions.
Okay, well, thank you. And I concur with my fellow colleagues that you're doing a great job and we're very lucky to have your leadership. Thank you for the good work you do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments of council? Councillor Alfred has a follow-up.
Not really. Just for those watching that may not be familiar, Chief, there is compensation given to the volunteers as well.
Through the chair, that's correct.
Okay. Just everybody, we call them volunteers, and they're a big part of our fire department, but I don't know that everybody realized that there is compensation for volunteer firefighters as well. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you. Through the chair, certainly express my sincere appreciation to council for the support that you provided for the firefighters. And I can say that during the last 6 months, our full-time firefighters have not taken a vacation day. During our meeting, they all agreed, given our staffing situation and given the current situation with the pandemic, that they agreed to hold that off. So the staff deserve the tremendous amount of credit that you're putting forward. Thank you.
Thank you. I have just a couple of questions, Chief, before we move on. I really look forward to receiving the follow-up report to 2019. And hopefully next time we do an end of year report, we don't have a pandemic and it can be delivered a lot sooner. So it allows us to budget appropriately for the coming years. And I think most of the questions that I had kind of in my head will probably be addressed in that annual report. Do you have a date for it to come forward?
I'm proposing that it should be complete within the next 2 weeks.
Okay, perfect. One of the things that was discussed, if not part of the 2016 report, not long before that, was a thorough business planning analysis for the offering of dispatch services, not only to Lanark, and I don't believe we have the contract with Leeds Grenville right now, but I know we do provide service to several northern communities. What's your sense about the sustainability of our dispatching contract at this point?
Again, that's an excellent question. We've been reviewing our dispatch services in discussion with the CAO. There will be further discussions on an analysis of our dispatching system. The current dispatching system that we have right now, as I presented last year, at the start of this year, is certainly near or at capacity with regards to taking on additional departments. Now, saying that, we've had a department who has reached out and requested our dispatching services. It fits within the current system that we have, requires no additional frequencies, and supposedly, the total cost for updating the mapping system through Bell, updating our CAD system, they're willing to pay. So that'll be an additional, if we do embark on that, and I would bring that report to council, would be an additional $10,000 to $12,000 a year for our communication center. When we take a look at our revenue that's being received with regards to the dispatching service, along with the 2 automatic aid agreements that we have in place, we're in excess of $400,000 a year, and that's a major portion of that is certainly through the county. In round figures, that equates to just over 4 full-time staff. So we have a system that's functioning. We have a system that's going to require an upgrade, and I know that the county has put forth some replacement parts for their system, but they propose to do a total evaluation of the communication system throughout the county, and that will include our systems. So in my opinion, at this point in time, it is viable, it is operational, and certainly we provide the level of service that's greatly needed out there. Should we go farther? Not with the current system. And to go farther, we would have to evaluate what the staffing level requirements would be. It seems counterintuitive to what we're trying to do is provide the level of service for the town of Smith Falls, but we're using a full-time firefighter in the capacity as a dispatcher. So again, as with the lack of volunteers, are there other options out there? Yes, there are. But that's again, something that needs to be reviewed and discussed through an evaluation of our current operation and viability and longevity of the current communication system.
Thank you, Chief. I mean, I'm really hoping that the 2019 annual report will provide some substantial analysis to justify the points that you just raised, so that we can unequivocally show that it does make sense to have that, and that the level of service that we are providing under the current model or future model meets the NFPA requirements. The only other question I had pertains to the volunteers. You mentioned that Leonard County as a whole is recruiting probably 20 to 30 volunteers. What percentage of that is needed for the town of Smiths Falls?
We would be looking at 6 new volunteers to bring us back up to our complement of 18. Now
Okay, and is that our legislated minimum?
That's the minimum the council agreed to for staffing levels of the volunteers from my predecessors.
Okay, thank you. And appreciating, of course, that we've had some turnover in our volunteers, and COVID has created a predicament as it relates to training. Are we in a position where we have volunteers who are reporting to calls who are not fully certified to be on a truck or responding to a fire?
We've had the current volunteers that we have had the bare minimum training. They have not completed their certification for firefighter level 2, but they have been trained in the basic necessities of the breathing apparatus, protective clothing, the response protocol. They have not driven the vehicles until they complete all the requirements under the current NFPA requirement. They will not be driving the vehicles. And what we are hoping that with the recruitment of the new 6 firefighters and bringing those staffing up to the NFPA standard for firefighter 1 and 2, that the current new volunteers that we have that aren't at that level would be incorporated at the end so that they could do the makeup test as well and be certified to that level.
Okay, I can appreciate that. I mean, my concern—
Just a point of order, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Just a point of order. I was under the impression we were going to talk about some data. We're going pretty far reaching with this conversation. I didn't do any work to prepare for this kind of a conversation. And we wait till the annual report. This was supposed to be about some data, mid-year data, and we've gotten very far off track and going into some really deep discussion that I'm not prepared for. And I would appreciate the chief to have more time to prepare to talk about his annual report. So I suggest that we stop this conversation and get on with the rest of the business, Madam Chair.
Yeah, respectfully, Councillor McKenna, every other member of council has spoken to this topic with the exception of myself. I have one last question for the chief, and then we can move on, if you don't mind. Chief, the only other question I had pertained to whether or not you feel that the future of the department is sustainable as a full-time department, or if you think in a big picture across the province, we're going to see more of a need to move to an exclusively volunteer department.
To you, Madam Chair, I truly believe that the composite setup that is currently in Smith Falls is maintainable. And watching some of the other jurisdictions throughout Ontario who have struggled with volunteers and being a composite department, they've been able to maintain their volunteer levels as well. Again, I think it's going to take some work and some thought process to being a little more creative, being a little more flexible in how we approach our recruitments and how we conduct our training levels. But the viability of of a composite department or a total volunteer department in Ontario. There's no question in my mind, it's been around, I won't say for how many years because I'm not exactly sure, a lot. And the volunteer component still makes up approximately 70% of the firefighting service in Ontario. So there's no question that it's still viable. It's just in certain areas, they are faced with different situations. And again, you compare that to emergency management, it's not a one size fits all. So it's based on your needs and circumstances. It's based on the level of service that council endorses, that's put forth on recommendations. It's based on the statistical information that's been requested tonight through the annual report. There's a number of factors that will dictate exactly what direction you're going to go or how you can maintain what you have, or certainly how you can enhance it. So I wish I could provide you with a simple yes or no, but it's a little more detailed than that. And again, we take direction from the top. So when the standards are set forth and the legislation is put forth, we're bound to comply with it. And as adopting into the NFPA family, then we're bound to follow what we've started down that path. So I'm hopeful, and I'll never say positive, but I'm extremely hopeful that you're going to see a composite department in Smith Falls for a lot of years to come.
Thank you, Chief. Okay, with that, we'll receive your report for information. And I think, like Councillor McGuire mentioned, we look forward to receiving the annual report in the next 2 or 3 weeks so that we can certainly have a more fulsome conversation about it. So thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is business licensing. This was an item that I requested that the clerk put on several weeks ago, and it comes based on conversations that I've had with Director Costello. If she's still here, maybe I'll ask her to pipe up and chime along, because I know that she's been working with our staff to develop a bit of some baseline data around business licensing in municipalities. So the reason I put this on was because I've heard on a reoccurring basis from multiple new businesses downtown that they have been confused by why and how their business licensing application is being processed. Business licensing is something that the town of Smith Falls has had for a number of years, going on as long as I had worked there, and probably predates my tenure on staff by about 5 years. Business licensing is a non-legislated function of municipalities. No other municipality in Lanark County, nor North Grenville, Brockville, or any of the lower tier municipalities in Leeds and Grenville do business licensing. Some larger municipalities do include business licensing components for vulnerable risk occupancies. So things like tattoo parlors, food trucks go through chip truck licensing, hot dog carts, massage parlors, and I should say that the less reputable massage parlors seem to be what is included in the policies that municipalities apply. Our business licensing was pitched as an idea many years ago and continued in 2019 when we updated our policy as something that would help assist businesses in walking through the process requirements to open their doors. It involves a ribbon cutting ceremony and scheduling of a grand opening with the mayor or acting mayor of the month. It involves voluntary inspections by the chief building official and the fire prevention officer. And in some cases, it involves assisting businesses through things like sign requirements or connecting people with the Small Business Enterprise Center for business support. So no doubt the goal and intent of the policy was one that was going to be helpful and instructive to businesses. But I find that the feedback that I'm receiving from the community is that it's applied a little too late in the process, because what businesses are reporting is that once they file their business license application, they're told that they will have a business license within 15 days, which is the best practice listed within the application form. But that by the time they get through a fire inspection and more importantly, a building inspection, often these inspections result in a dramatic need for work to retrofit their units through a change of use through the Ontario Building Code specifically, and in some cases, some additional work through fire protection services. What happens is that these businesses are only being told this information 15 days before they intend to open, as is suggested within their business licensing. And this means that they're incurring dramatic costs in delaying the start of their operations, and it's detrimental to their businesses. I don't disagree that there's a need for these spaces to be inspected and safe. And when they are non-compliant, there are processes in accordance with the Ontario Building Code that require things like a change of use. And it doesn't matter if it's sparked by a business license or it's sparked by them opening the doors. As soon as they open, there's a requirement that they meet the Ontario Building Code. But I think what we're finding is that the process is a little bit misleading right now, and it's bringing forward these items too late. I think there's something to be said for due diligence by businesses to check into the permissions needed to operate in their space anytime there is a change of use. And this is where things get confusing, is that a change of use under the zoning bylaw is very different than a change of use under the Ontario Building Code. They mean totally different things. So while most businesses will call the zoning department and say, am I zoned for this permitted use in the space? And planning will say, yes, you are. That does not necessarily mean that you are permitted to operate that without a change of use under the Ontario Building Code. So the reason I brought this forward is twofold. One, right now, the business licensing bylaw is not a dramatic revenue generator for us. Director Costello can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe our licensing fees are $50 per annum. And they are intended to cover the cost of staff to inspect the facility and double check to make sure that everybody is kosher. But that wasn't really its intent. The second piece is because I think we have taken our business licensing bylaw and blown it up into something that no other community in Ontario is doing. These are intended to be used to regulate as a second check for vulnerable businesses who, despite having clearance from the Ontario Building Code to open their doors initially, may not be compliant year over year and require cyclical inspections. This is similar to how we operate chip trucks, which change every year and do require annual inspections. So what I would suggest is that council perhaps direct staff to go back and have a second look at our business licensing bylaw to confirm whether or not it is relevant to what the Ontario Municipal Act requires for business licensing, which is not much. It's you may have this policy and it may include the following things. And I would also like to see a comparator across other municipalities to see whether or not there is actual value in operating this service or if it's becoming more of a headache to our staff. Because a lot of the files that have become contentious are stressful for staff to mitigate and costly. The initial check-in involves significant follow-up for re-inspection, re-permitting, discussions with designers before they even open their doors. And it's a headache to our staff and it's a headache to our local businesses. Carrie, I know not to put the spotlight on you, but I know you had asked your staff to take a preliminary look at some of the statistics, and I wondered if perhaps you could provide some of that for consideration.
Certainly, there really isn't a lot of statistical analysis we did. What we found was either municipalities were in or out of the business licensing game. So either they had business licensing in place or they didn't. And it seemed to be more of our urban centers that had business licensing in place. I can give council some information just because of my history here at the town where this has been discussed probably even with Councillor Alfred when you were on council previously by numerous councils, and each council has a different take on it. There, the one council will feel that, there's absolutely not to charge a fee that will incent businesses to come and get a license and have the proper inspections in place to make it a safe place. So we know it's safe when residents or tourists are going into it. And then some councils, another council has been wanting to do more of a revenue generator, revenue neutral analysis, and make sure that the town comes out revenue neutral. And it's $100, but Councillor Dwyer, you are correct. It is not a revenue generator at this time. So, I mean, every council who's discussed it, the fee seems to have been more of the discussion point. But most councils, or the two councils that I can remember that have spoken about this in the past, the health and safety, or the, ensuring that the business was safe for occupancy, both from a fire and building perspective, were paramount for both councils. So, I mean, it's obviously a council decision whether they want to, keep going with the business licensing bylaw or some version of it, or if they wish to opt out of having business licensing.
Thank you, Carrie. So the purpose of me raising this tonight is to give staff a little bit of direction with council to go back and do an analysis again to see whether or not there is actual value in this, or whether or not it's a bit of a make work project for our staff to continue to operate year over year. I don't disagree. And of course, we all want our businesses to be health and safety compliant. There are legislated mechanisms through both the Ontario Building Code and the Fire Protection Act that allow for that. I just don't think that it's appropriate or necessary to tie it to the business license, which is something that can come into question on a reoccurring basis, because it is discretionary to council. I think if we're going to enforce a hard line on compliance with those components, then we need to rely on the statutory legislation that requires it in the first place. So with that, perhaps I'll open the floor to questions if anybody does have questions, and then perhaps we can come to a decision about whether or not to give staff direction. Councillor McGuire.
Thank you, Councillor Dwyer. I support taking another look at this. It's when you're talking to business owners, it's definitely been instances where this has been a nightmare in practice. And I think it, as you say, there's ways to go about these inspections that are legally mandated that aren't through the town's business license process. So I would look forward to seeing a report from staff.
Thank you, Chris. Director Costello?
I need to rescind what I just said, Councillor Dwyer. My apologies. We do not have a fee. We used to have $100 filing fee. I'm getting my years mixed up.
I know, Carrie. It's hard. It's hard. Sean, I think your hand was up as well.
Sure. Actually, Councillor Alford was before me.
Oh, sorry. Councillor Alford? Your mic is on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I'm not adverse to some of what you've said, but this is the very first time we had, usually when we have these discussions, we have some heads up on what this is about and all of the ramifications or all the issues that are involved in something like this. So I would have preferred to have, and I know you put it on the agenda, but I would like time to process all that you've said. In fact, I'm probably going to have to watch this back to catch all the points. You made some good ones, but I don't want to react right this moment. I would rather have a little bit of time to do some of my own research. I didn't know what we were going to talk about tonight, so I read the business bylaw today just in preparation, but I don't think it did prepare me. So
no, fair enough. I think that's why I did email council to advise that this was going on 3 weeks ago. I did have a couple questions from councillors, but I appreciate your feedback, and perhaps we can add it back to the discussion again. Mayor Penko?
If you wouldn't mind, I would just like a little more time to do my process it and speak to staff and get my head around all that you've brought up tonight.
Yep, fair enough. Mayor Penko?
Thank you. This is an item, obviously, that does create some points of friction from time to time, and I do get concerns from business owners who maybe are unfamiliar with the process, or the process could open the door to more than they expected. And I think that's part of the challenges of being an entrepreneur, is you may be really good at doing what you're doing, and you're going to start a new business, you may not understand the role that municipality plays. So I see this as a gateway to compliance in some ways, making sure that they're obviously zoning, building code, and fire compliant, which obviously is critical to the safety of our residents and anybody else, and protect the business owner at the same time. It's also the gateway to, as you mentioned briefly, the opportunity for connections to other resources, a connection to our economic development department, a connection to the Small Business Enterprise Center in Valley Heartland, and try and help open the door. So what I often find is it's communication. It can sometimes be a challenge. Expectations may not be met because expectations may not be reasonable. In other words, when you apply for business license, in some ways you're opening a Pandora's box and may not expect to be there. And as a result, it leads to a lot more work by both staff and sometimes and obviously the business owner, and sometimes the need for some outside consultation in order to get things completed. So while someone may come in applying for a business license expected to have it in 15 days, they don't maybe at that point understand all the ramifications that are going to happen when they're doing this. So that said, I don't recall really delving into this in my 10 years on council. And I think there's some merit in recognizing assessing the value it brings to the municipality, to the public, but also to the businesses. And like everything else that we do, and as a municipality, I think there's always room for improvement and refinement and review. So I'm fine either way. I think if staff want to come forward with some report that we can just discuss it further and decide if we want to delve more deeply into it. But if you want to circulate information via email, we can review and bring it back. I'm fine either way. But I do agree it has some merit to review.
Councillor Brennan?
Yeah, I mean, things come on the agenda, and I've been on council for 9 years, and Lorraine and Mayor Panko will attest to this. Lots of times we have an item on the agenda that's brought forward by a colleague, and you wonder what that is. So just wait to the meeting and find out. It's not like we're deciding tonight. The subject's been broached. The idea is to take it back to staff and come back to us for a fulsome discussion. We're not going to have a fulsome discussion tonight. I didn't expect that. I think it has merit. And what perked my ears up is when I hear that no one else around here does this. So I'd like to hear about who does and why they don't. I imagine the city of Ottawa has a pretty fulsome business license for their businesses. But if we have our neighbors here that don't, and how do they do it? And what's the merit of having one? So, let's bring this back again. I mean, you just started the discussion. That's all that is. So let's talk about it some more.
Thank you. I will say as a staff member, I mean, I love business licensing. I would love to do business licensing everywhere because it's basically an entrapment game. I'll be honest. You get somebody who walks in and it's a trigger for staff to do a fulsome review. And that's not something that we always get. Councillor McGuire is laughing, but it's true. And it's a discussion that I've had at every municipality I've worked at since Smiths Falls. It's not its intent, but it is the implication of having the policy is that as soon as somebody walks in the door, there's a requirement for staff to do their due diligence and review the property for full compliance. And that's where you start to raise flags. Councillor Allen, I believe you had your hand up.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say I agree. I'd like to have a report brought and so we can have a broader conversation and more information.
Thank you. Councillor McKenna.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I note that I'm not opposed to this either. The review, I wouldn't, knowing how busy our staff are and that this is not on any of our strategic priority lists, I wondered if we could, before staff come back with it, if the mayor's task force, is there any link to business? Is there some other place that we could have this conversation and get a little bit more input? The mayor's task forces are well represented. I don't know if it fits with the mandate there, but it's certainly not on our strategic plan. And I just don't want to put a lot of energy and resource into this. I think we're going to have all of our bylaws coming forward. Not all of our bylaws, the our procedures? Does it fit under that? No, it doesn't.
No.
Oh, they are totally separate bylaws, and this one was one that was just rewritten and approved by this council in 2019.
Yeah.
I will say, I can appreciate that it's not a strategic priority. My sense is that it's an operational question that we haven't really addressed fulsomely yet. And I think, and perhaps this is premature to say, but my sense is that if staff goes back and looks at the amount of follow-up that is needed across departments to close out business licensing, that there's a significant volume of work, and undertaking a review like this could ultimately be saving us a significant volume of work going forward.
Yeah. Anyways, I wasn't quite finished. So just, I'm not opposed to it. And I'm in no hurry for it. And as long as staff have some time to actually do this work, I wouldn't be opposed to it, but I don't need to see it in the next month.
Thank you. Councillor Brennan, I think you had your hand up again.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good suggestion with the mayor's task force. I mean, we were meeting with businesses and it could be an agenda item on Friday. It's, see what they think, those members that are there. So
Thank you. Mayor Panko?
Yeah, it's probably more suited for Economic Development Advisory Committee, but again, we have not met for a while due to COVID. So either way, we can have some consultation, but it may be a matter of a survey to the public as well. So I think there's opportunities for feedback, but I think initially, if we echo the overall response here is I think that the sentiment that we'd like to take a deeper look at it, but maybe not necessarily back to us in 2 weeks.
CAO Morris?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I think if we look at the mandate of the Mayor's Task Force on Economic Recovery, it's specifically COVID related, and I would submit this policy is not COVID related. I think the mayor stated it well that it's more of an economic development issue. But at the end of the day, it's a life safety issue as well. So I think staff can go out off and do the research, perhaps engage the Economic Development Committee if committee's comfortable with that, and bring back something probably in a couple months' time. We have some large strategic items to bring forward on the agenda over the next couple of weeks. So, but if that's the direction of council, we can certainly bring back an analysis of the program for sure.
Thank you. Director Costello?
Malcolm just said what I was going to say. Jennifer Miller texted me about 5 minutes ago wanting a copy of the bylaw. So staff were thought ahead. So we'll do some consultation, Manager Miller and myself, and we can bring some information forward. And yeah, and I appreciate what Malcolm said. A couple months' time would be fair given the current strategic priorities that we're looking into.
Thank you, Carrie. Okay, our next item on the agenda is item 7H, the arena reopening budget implications report with Director Manhire. I'm sorry, it's getting late. It's been a
Thank you, Madam Chair. It is getting late, and I appreciate your patience. What we're looking at today is just a report that updates on a very quick-moving and evolving circumstance. So with the announcement of phase 3 for reopening in Ontario, the province announced that we could reopen indoor facilities with a number of stipulations that were connected to it. We've spent the last month or two circling back with user groups as well as with public health to try to figure out what those protocols look like and how we can do this safely but yet provide an experience to the public. So it kind of prompts the idea that there has been implications. In the spring, we lost approximately $112,000 worth of revenue with COVID shutting down. The current protocols don't allow us to open. This is not a business as usual approach to reopening. Far from it. We still have all the stipulations that are in the OREG, coming back to this service. Some of those are fairly basic in that we can only have 50 people in a cohort, as an example. The people in indoor facilities need to wear masks. We need to have cleaning protocols in place, directional signage, and maintain that distancing as much as possible. And to the extent that even within the facility, with some of the cohorts, we need to have personal protective equipment. People have to wear masks, but they also have to social distance. So there's some pretty good pieces in place. We've been trying to work out what they look like, and we think we've got a pretty good handle on what that looks like. But having said that, I've had 3 conversations with public health today that are trying to clarify some of the protocols and some of the procedures in place. So, as I said, a very evolving piece in terms of regulations, but also in terms of users and how they actually can function. So the idea of a cohort of 50 people, as an example, if you've got a league that has 100 people in it, people were saying, well, we can't operate. And what we've tried to do is help work through how they can provide a service and still stay safe. And that's been our priority all along. We want to make sure that we can provide an experience, but do it in a way that doesn't unnecessarily increase risk. The department as a whole, virtually everything we do is risk management. Everything that we provide has a level of risk to it. This, of course, has a whole new level. If you look at the media today, where incidences are rising, where we've got services that are reopening, we're trying to keep it so that we're not creating additional risk in the community. In saying that, we are looking at we have reached out to user groups and determined kind of what we think is anticipated use for the fall. Initially, we were looking at one surface. As we started getting closer, we got enough demand for what we think is 2 surfaces. Now that demand is something that has been something where user groups have expressed interest in having a certain number of hours provided. As we've started booking, we put something out last week. We've already got at least one group that has cut that down. It's a relatively minor cut, but it means an additional $9,000 in revenue that we will not get because they're not using the facility during that time. So it is a bit of a moving target in terms of what we anticipate the end result to be. We have some opportunity to make up some of that revenue in one-off user groups coming in and booking the facilities. And in a normal year, we would have approximately 30% of our use doing that. So at this point, we have started the ice plant in the community center. We are getting the paint and the lines and logos down today, and are online to have that service opened up for the 21st of September, and the second service in the youth arena opened up for the 28th of September. We have currently 4 cohorts that we've identified in the facility, and we're fortunate enough that we can actually isolate those cohorts, have different entrances, different washrooms, different access so that those cohorts can't cross over. And that's an important component in the health regulations coming from the province. So we've been very fortunate in that we have that set up. We've put in stanchions and signage and barricades to prevent that mixing. And we feel that we can provide a safe experience for people using the facility. It's the level of that experience. As an example, we have a 25-minute time between user groups so that we can actually get in, do ice maintenance as well as maintenance on washrooms and change rooms in order to have the next groups come in. So it does create a bit of a delay time there in terms of how much ice we can use. So instead of a 15-minute, we've got 25 minutes, which again impacts the amount of usable time and usable space that we can then sell. So overall, right now we're projecting, including the spring losses, approximately $207,000 in shortfall from what was projected in the 2020 budget back in the fall of last year. And that may change depending on what happens, because the other issues are that most groups cannot continue their service by provincial regulation as a regular service. So it won't be the same rules as normal. There are groups, and the CCHL being one of those groups that has a meeting. The CCHL, just for information, is the group that runs the Bears, that are our Junior A franchise. They have a meeting with the province. The league has a meeting with the province and the provincial health unit and medical officer of health to try to pitch an exception for that group to operate. That hearing is later on this week, and that may change what the protocols are. It may also change what they can and cannot do. So if they're not granted the ability to run games as usual, as an example, they are going to be running development camps. Those development camps mean that they can do some scrimmaging within their cohort, but they can't play outside of that cohort. So right now we're booked till December, but the time after December is very, very unclear at this point as to whether they could continue to operate doing development programs throughout the year without having scrimmaging and games. So right now we're not booking beyond December because groups are not at all clear. Groups are hopeful that there will be changes in the protocols. Our public health friends are not hopeful and that there will be changes. So at this point, it's going to be dependent on what happens in society as a whole. And again, trying to mitigate risk, trying to eliminate possible risk as much as possible, and manage that risk so that we can provide the experience that people are looking for in the community. And that's really the crux of it in terms of trying to create a quality of life experience for people that are looking to access services at the community center, which will also include the walking track as one of the cohorts in the meeting rooms upstairs. So our 4 cohorts are the youth arena as one, the users, a cohort for the stands, which will double not only for people to watch activity, but also for parents to come in with their young children to help them get dressed and get out onto the ice. There'll be a cohort for the youth arena as well as one for the meeting rooms and walking track area. So I'll leave that there and entertain any questions if you have any.
Thank you, Art. Councillor McKenna.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Director Manhire, I don't know if this question is for you or for CAO Morris, but I'm thinking about the COVID phase 2 money that might be available to help mitigate some of the cost related to COVID. And I guess the question is, if we knowingly go ahead and try to get everything open, knowing that we're going to take a loss or there's a potential for a loss, and then we file a claim for that, is that an eligible claim? And is there a hierarchy of these COVID claims around that?
So, Janet,
Just to let you know, this first phase of funding is not claim-based. We'll get the funding and we will have to report back next March as to what we allocated it towards. But again, we want to make certain of what those eligible criteria are because we close out our year end before the end of March. So I don't want to close out year end anticipating these expenditures will be reimbursed and then we're told they're not. So that's why I'm trying to get clarification, but it's not claim-based.
so Madam Chair, if I can, the other thing is that we have operated other services during COVID, and the protocols that are in place put strain on the normal operating. So where we have additional staff to do screening and cleaning and some of those pieces, and it restricts our numbers of participants. Those have all been eligible as part of the claim process because they're following protocol that enhances our cost, our overall cost and business model in terms of delivering the service.
Thank you. Councillor McKenna, you have a follow-up?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And I understand that. I maybe view the last 6 months as being fairly essential services where I would look at the arena operation perhaps not being essential. So I get that. So yeah, I would just like to understand that better before we knowingly walk into a large deficit that may or may not be supported by the province. But thank you for the report. Oh.
CAO Morris, did you have a comment on that point?
Yes. So really good question from Councillor McKenna. So as Jen had indicated, the first round of relief funding is just a formula. The second round will be based on an application, but we don't know what the criteria is yet. So I think the whole point of this report is there is some risk here, financial risk. We're projecting $207,000 deficit. That it could increase. It could also decrease. If we find that demand for ice drops below a certain threshold, then we'll probably close the second ice surface to try and reduce and control costs. But at this point, until we get the criteria for the application-based funding, we don't know if this will apply or not. What we do know is our overall corporate deficit exceeds the provincial money we got in the first round. So we will be, I expect, banking on the second round of application-based funding. And one hopes that this would be eligible. But as soon as we find out what the criteria is, we'll certainly let committee know.
Thank you, CEO Morris. Councillor Brennan, I think, had his hand up first, and then Mayor Pankow.
Yeah, thanks for this, Art. And you know, what a difficult job for you and staff. And you know, when you think about the arena, and when I look at your chart, we're the last arena to open in the area. And really what people, it's a service. And I think at this time, it's very important to try to give an experience to people to be able to go skating. And hopefully we'll have a little bit of public skating involved in that. But you know, it's a real challenge. And I mean, the schools are no different. So we've got to keep a handle on it. Things aren't going the best right now, but I'm certainly not at this point saying, no, we shouldn't open the arena because I think we need it right now for everybody's sake. And I think everyone around here is doing a good job as far as taking care of themselves. I mean, sometimes it's beyond your control, but I think the citizens need an experience. They need some sort of normalcy. And if we can keep a handle on the precautions that we're taking, and it seems to me that you've done that, then I am certain that when I read the release for phase 2 of provincial assistance, it seemed to me that this sort of thing is tailor-made for it, and hopefully we can be successful at that point. But you know, good job so far, as I can say. Thanks.
Mayor Pankow.
Yep, thank you. And Art, thank you for advancing this, and I know it's against big obstacles and the concern for making sure the public can be safe through this whole process. It seems that we've evolved pretty quickly from having one ice pad open to two. And there were two questions. There's one, is the roughly $50,000 a month of revenue, does that cover our overhead to keep the facilities running for both running? And secondly, what prompted the decision to go ahead and open the youth arena a week later if we are not at capacity with the Memorial Center ice pad?
Madam Chair, great questions. The capacity is a relative term. It's the ice space that people actually want to purchase. So, through the service review, we had some thresholds that we wanted to meet in terms of how many hours we wanted to book and what our operating costs were and what the differences were. We were able to double up on staffing, which is going to be a bit of a challenge in this case, just because when I say double up on staffing, I mean we had the same staff that we staggered the times, the start times in each side, so that we could have one staff do maintenance on both sides instead of having the changeover at the same time. So before the service review, we would have two staff doing that work. Now we have one staff that goes back and forth with staggered times. So the cost differential is about $6,000–7,000 a month for hydro costs to run the ice plant. We have the same staff using that space. So the threshold for that second space is fairly broad. The issue around how much we're selling, where we initially were looking at 50% of our available ice to be sold. What we're getting here is we're getting people who want ice, but they, for the most part, are not necessarily changing their booking behavior. Meaning that we have ice during the day when people traditionally don't use it. So we still have that kind of stuff available. The Bears have essentially tried to book the same times as they would normally for league play. I think in anticipation that they will have league play. So they're not going during the days. So we haven't broadened the base of when people are using the facility, but the number of hours means that we either have to turn people away or we have to open that second surface, and that's where the economic viability of that second piece comes into play.
And we hope that with two ice pads available, there will be more interest.
And that is the hope, is that we can actually, because we have the product available, we can then sell more of that product as people know it's there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Manhire. Any other questions from council? Seeing none, we will move on. I believe we are receiving this report for information.
Yes.
Yes. Do we need to pass a resolution, Nadine, or?
No, I mean, it would be received as information only at this point in time, unless Councillor Manhire feels that, or sorry, Director Manhire feels that he needs a specific resolution.
Thank you. Mr. Manhire?
No, there were two options listed, and I'm assuming we're going with option number one. We will keep council up to date on our progress in terms of not only in terms of booking, but also in terms of our protocols and what we have in place. Just as an example, I'm sorry, Madam Chair, just as an example, we did have, there are some vulnerabilities here, and if we start running into cases or we have an outbreak, that's going to create some challenges for us in terms of continuing to operate. So I'll keep council up to date on our progress, and we can bring this back anytime.
Thank you. Mr. Manhire, can you just state for the record what that option one is?
Yeah, so option one is to open the facility as indicated with two pads starting 1 week apart. And I think there was a question about the week apart. We do have to, from From a facility safety perspective, we can't start both plants at the same time, which is why we're a week apart. So with COVID-19 safety protocols in place and enforced, staff will focus on optimizing available ice time to minimize revenue loss and uphold safety protocols.
Thank you. There's a consensus from council to do so. So thank you for the report. It's received for the record, and you are clear to proceed with option 1. Our final report this evening is a zoning amendment report on Van Horn Avenue. The developer is Big C Engineering and Construction, Inc. Carl has the staff report. Carl, high-level overview, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hi, everyone again. I'm just bringing forward a zoning amendment application that we've received on Van Horn. It's the property is it's about 1.25 acres. It's in between a grouping of townhomes and Van Horn Manor. It's across from the Settlers Ridge Center. The best usable part of the property, of course, is the little piece that's right on Van Horn, and on that property, they're proposing to construct a 24-unit apartment building. The property is currently zoned R5, which is the zoning category for townhouses and generally that sort of medium density development. The application, the support council, is to rezone to R6 to accommodate an apartment building, as well as seek a couple of parking exceptions. So we have the Planning Advisory Committee posted a public meeting earlier this summer. A number of concerns were raised, especially in writing before the public meeting, with respect to the density, the parking, and the density and the parking. The original request was looking for relief on the parking requirements of the zoning bylaw as well. So and there were also concerns with respect to impact on the landscape behind the townhouses. So at the public meeting, the proponent offered to reduce the number of units in the parking in the development from 26 to 24, and that would allow the development to maintain the parking threshold that's required in the zoning bylaw. The zoning bylaw requires 1.25 parking spaces per unit. So with 24 units on that lot, they would the 30 parking spaces would fit. So the challenge, of course, with this property is it is topographically constrained, and that limits really a whole lot of expansion and development further beyond what's already there. So the Public Works Department didn't outline any concerns. They feel that the servicing is adequate for that use at that location from a transportation and servicing perspective. Naturally, there would have to be a lot of specific details would be addressed through site plan control if council approves the zoning. The Rideau Valley Conservation Authority also didn't have concerns with respect to the development principle, the R6 zoning, but they did advise that there is a rock outcropping there that can constitute a natural hazard. So we would need to address that through a geotechnical report as a condition of site plan approval. Site plan approval, of course, would also in very detail address grading and drainage on this property. So the Planning Advisory Committee considered the feedback. They welcomed the reduction in the number of parking spaces, which would alleviate that sort of density concern there, and the PAC passed a resolution in support of the application. So this is a property that's already zoned residential. It already the zoning bylaw already accommodates medium density residential. So what's being proposed here simply upzones that to allow a higher density residential. So on the lot as a whole, the density taken as units per hectare is not huge, but that's most of the lot is effectively undevelopable. So the official plan establishes a number of criteria that we look at in considering and evaluating applications to increase the density. And I won't go into too much detail on those. They are appended to the report and evaluated. However, I think in this case we have a location where there isn't really there's a mix of densities and land uses in this area. There isn't an established consistent form of development on that in that area. And as such, given that this is a vacant lot, it's on a collector road, I think there is an opportunity certainly for some intensification there. So there's definitely a number of concerns that were raised through the planning process. In our opinion, most of those can be and will need to be addressed through a site plan process, and that would include the geotechnical investigation, a landscaping plan to ensure protection of green space behind existing townhomes, and the replacement as possible of removed trees, stormwater management, and building design and lighting to mitigate the impacts on adjacent uses. So I think that so in just to summarize, we appreciate the feedback and the public engagement on this application, and certainly that has led to that has contributed to a change and a modification there proposed by the proponent and welcomed by PAC and staff. So it's the recommendation of staff that the council passes a bylaw to rezone the property as indicated. So I'll pause there and welcome any feedback from committee.
Thank you. Any questions, comments, or concerns from council? Mayor Pankow?
Yes, thank you for letting me go first. My battery's about to die, so I'm going to vanish here in a moment. Carl, I just want to say I support this completely. I think the effort between yourself, the developer, and all staff who've been involved in this have come up with a great solution. I think with Van Hort Manor on one side, the townhomes on the other, it's great intensification. It's close to a mall. It's close to schools. It's on a major road. No, I just say well done. I support this completely.
Thank you, Sean. Thumbs up all around. Perfect. If there's no other questions, concerns, or comments, then we will move on. Thanks, Carl. Sorry to leave you right until the 11th hour. I need a motion to move in camera. For people who are following along, we do have to move in camera for one item, and then we will come back out of the in camera for an adjournment. So motion to move in camera. Councillor Brennan, seconded by Councillor McKenna, all in favor. Thank you. Hi there, welcome back. Sorry, and thank you for your patience while we dealt with an in-camera item. The outcome of the in-camera item was that council received an update from staff and provided direction on a potential litigation. With that, that brings us to our last item of business tonight, which is adjournment. So I will call for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Brennan, it is 8:10, seconded by Councillor McGuire. All those in favor? Thank you. Have a good evening, ladies and